Hey y'all, sorry about cutting myself off again. I don't know why, I just keep doing that. I'm still new to the whole video recording thing, so I'll get better, I promise, on that. But about the spells and spell casting and the witch's pyramid and that stuff, I think pretty much said all I needed to say about that. But I do want to talk a little bit more about the subconscious mind and where the power is and the creativity and all that you really need fully developed for effective magic and spell work in general. So to basically be able to even do spells and do magic, you need that developed. And that's not going to be something that a lot of people just naturally have, other than like your artists and your other creative people. It's not really going to be naturally in a modern adult's mind. Now, whenever we're children, we all have it. Every child has that, is in touch with their subconscious and has a lot of creative power. But the thing is that in a lot of children, it is suppressed and oppressed because of the matrix. And I'm going to have to describe to you what the matrix is, because we all have different associations to each word and different definitions to each word, especially words like that. So to me, what I'm calling the matrix is kind of the false society and civilizations that we live in, and the governments that we live in, and nations that we live in, and the mental barriers that imposes on us, because it really does. And I'm not discriminating against any specific version of these systems, but they're all part of the matrix, every single one of them. And that has to do a lot with being able to gain power. You have to be able to detach from them. So for instance, or to be more specific, I mean, the concepts of living in houses, of going into buildings, of having streets set up in grid patterns, and towns set up in grids and squares and rectangles, all these straight lines that you do not find in nature like that. And really just all that in general, it makes your mindset completely different from how it would be if you were just a human living on the earth, living in nature, the way that it was intended to be before all this man-made stuff was created to the extent that it is now, where it's just all over the world now. That's what the Matrix is. It is that false reality. Yeah, I mean, it's real, it's physically real, but it's false in the sense of it is not natural. So if you want to be able to develop your power, you need to be able to detach from that. And I don't mean that you cannot function in it, because obviously that's how the world is. We all have to function in it, you guys. But what I mean is you free your mind from that limited mindset of the Matrix. And it's really going back to your ancestors and to the primitive times, because that's how they lived. They just lived as animals in nature, in caves and shit. And you really need to be able to tap back into that and just know that we are animals. Because I don't know if you're at the level of understanding where you realize that, or at the level of learning where you realize that we are just animals, y'all. Only that we have a higher consciousness where we can create realities that we desire. And in fact, that is how the Matrix came to be. It is because humans use this ability to create reality in their will. And that's what they did. So, you need to understand that we all have that power in us to create our own reality how we will it. And it does physically become real. depending on how much energy and stuff you put into it. And that's why you need to be able to tap into the power and not just casting spells. I mean, this power goes beyond spell casting only. Now, to a lot of people, this is suppressed when you're a child because, like I said, we all naturally have it. We all naturally have a deep connection to our subconscious when we're kids, and we all naturally have visualization skills and powerful imaginations and creative ability, but that is suppressed. Like, they'll be telling the kids, don't do that. That's fake. They'll be telling the kids, you're lying, stop, stuff like that. Imaginary friends are discouraged. Now, to that child, I mean, just remember back whenever you were a kid, you played games and you used your imagination and you used visualization skills to create a reality real time in your mind, though. Like, you would imagine entire environments and stuff superimposed on the real environment that was in front of you, and characters and all this. You use these abilities when you were a kid, y'all. So you have it. It's there to use real-time visualization to create magic. And it was just suppressed in a lot of you, and you have to redevelop that. Or if you're an artist or a creative person, this either was not suppressed in you, or if it was, you ignored it and you continue doing what you were doing anyways. But really, you need to be able to tap into that if you want to do magic successfully and use it right. Okay, so I really wanted to just say that in there. So to develop these powers, you need to be able to detach from the matrix, because the way that the matrix is set up is to where you will only use creativity within its confines of what is already physical. So what that means is you won't think of creating things that don't already exist or are not in some way already connected to what exists. You won't think of creating things like magic. You'll think only of creating physical things, because that's how they set it up to where, because if you think about it, the way that the world came to be how it is now with the Matrix and all, these things didn't just exist and then they were like, oh, we're going to make it based on what already exists. That's not how it happened. They totally just came up with these ideas and created it out of nowhere, out of thin air, out of nothing that existed before. They just designed it from their own minds. And you have to be able to do that too, to create things that don't already exist or are not based on anything that already exists. So that's where a lot of magic comes from, because magic is really not a physical thing. It's a spiritual thing. It's like a spiritual energy that is invisible. It's not physical. And to tap into that, you need to be able to take your mind to those levels of non-physical realities and then bring that into existence. So once again, if you're an artist or a creative person, you'll already have this skill highly developed because you already understand that. And most artists and creative people, they're predominantly using their subconscious mind anyways. Whereas the ordinary person who this has been suppressed in uses their rational conscious mind more often. So you definitely need to work on developing that. Now, this also has to do with understanding the different realms in order to gain power. What I mean. Because I feel like these videos need to be connected with how to cast spells and the witch's pyramid and all that, I feel like these two topics need to be connected also with how to even gain power to begin with, to even cast a spell. So you really need to reconnect to nature, which means freeing your mind from so much of the false physical or the illusionary physical, to get back in touch with nature itself. So this is why witches worship nature, because it is a gateway back to power, or back to how the way it was when we were just humans living on Earth without all these material things that are human created. So it's like hearkening back to the past, to that primal way of being, but at the same time it's also very relevant to gaining power now. So you need to pay attention to nature as much as you can. Get out of the houses, get out of the mindset of living in society, and really reconnect to nature. This is kind of a solitary thing in a way, because you need to be able to do this, and a lot of people will not understand it. A lot of people who are living in the matrix and stuff, they will not understand it because their mindset is going to be limited to that. So it's kind of, because of that reason, it's going to become kind of a solitary thing. Unless you do know other witches and other people who are interested in the same thing as you, then of course it's not solitary, but for the most part it's going to be solitary. And there's a lot of power to be found in it. If you follow the seasons and you align with them, if you pay attention to the Sabbats, the 8 Sabbats that represent the changes in the seasons and the cycles of nature and all that, learn about the planets, learn about their influences and astrology, pay attention to the moon phases and learn about what the different moon phases mean and what powers are associated with them. And that's what I was going to say, because understanding and knowledge is power. But you need to understand and have knowledge of the right things, which are going to be outside of the matrix. So, kind of lost track of what I was saying there. Of the elements, also the elements are a major step, especially for beginners. They're a major thing to learn about and understand. Okay, because that's what I was going to say. The mental realm and the spiritual realm are the same thing, y'all. Your mind and the divine spiritual reality are one and the same. Now, what does that mean? I'm going to have to describe this in detail for you. If you look at psychology, that is the modern scientific study of the mind. And the root word of psychology is psyche. Now, if you research into psyche and you research that word and you trace back to its roots, you'll learn that it comes from the ancient Greek word psyche, which actually they personified that word as a goddess. But if you study about that and learn not exactly the terminology, but if you pay attention to how they're describing it, and and you try to understand what they're describing, you will see that they're, in ancient terms and in ancient ways, they're describing the mind. Because where they said that psyche lived, they said that psyche lived in your head. That everyone had it, every person had it, and that it lived in your head. And they also called it your higher spirit, which they said lived in your head. And they also said that you had a lower animal spirit, which lived in your stomach. And the lower animal spirit, they said, was it was just as immortal as your body. Like it had a creation time and it had a death time, just like your body does. But the higher spirit, or psyche, which lives in your head, they said was immortal. Now, this is why they chose that word, psyche, as the root word of psychology, because they understand that these ancient people, the ancient Greeks, were talking about the same thing as the mind. What they call the higher spirit is the same thing that in modern times we call the mind. So it's just different terms as languages and knowledge has evolved. But it is talking about the same thing. Like, have y'all read that story whenever you were a kid or whatever about the blind man and the elephant? Where there's these blind men and they're all blind. And one day they come across an elephant and they all touch different parts of it. Like one of the blind men touches the leg and he's like, oh, an elephant is strong and hard and it's like round, so it's like a tree. An elephant is like a tree. Another one touches the elephant's nose, the trunk or whatever, and it's like, oh, an elephant's like a snake. And another blind man touches the elephant's tail and he's like, oh, an elephant is like a rope. So you see, they're all touching different parts of it. So they're describing the elephant differently, and that's what they think the elephant is. But really, later on, they all come together and they're all arguing about it and arguing about what an elephant is, and then they come to realize that the elephant was much bigger than the pieces they were touching and describing. So it's like the same thing with understanding at the deeper levels, different terms, and all these different descriptions of things are really like pieces to a puzzle. And you need to be able to put them together and understand them in the right way and not in any limited way. Now, which if you're part of the matrix, that's what it does. It will always limit how you will understand things. And this is why words are so powerful, because they're like a barrier if you don't have that deep understanding. So, once again, mind and spirit are the same thing. Psychology and spirituality are the same thing. They're both studies of the same thing, but just with different terms and descriptions of it. So you need to understand this. It's a major gateway to power, y'all, because when you understand that your mind is part of all of this higher spiritual stuff and realms and stuff, it really brings it to a more of a centered understanding instead of like an outer religious exoteric understanding that these things are outside of you. When you understand that it's all in your mind, it's more like you'll feel more part of that oneness and understand more of that oneness, that everything is one. So it really makes things more accessible to you when it comes to magic and the spiritual realms and stuff, because you'll be viewing it correctly. Then you won't be viewing it outside of you anymore. And whenever you view things as outside of you, you automatically have limits on it and what you can do with it and stuff. But once you view that all as part of your mind, your awareness will raise up to these higher levels. Now, this is its own branch of magic, and it's called theurgy, or theurgy. I'm not sure if I'm saying it right. Theurgy. You'll look into that. And it's also called ascent, like ascension. And it's where you raise your mind's awareness to understand and to realize in your daily life that you are part of the oneness. And not in a way like there's separations, but in a way of really oneness. So that's another gateway to power, y'all. try to understand that and look into that, especially if you're a beginner. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the different levels of understanding too, and the different levels of awareness. Each of these things in magic, like the elements, for example, of earth, fire, air, and water, and spirit, when you understand it from the perspective that your mind is part of all of it to begin with, and it's completely and permanently connected to all of it, it's not outside of you, you'll understand that these different elements are also a part of you, and that they're just at different levels of awareness in your mind. And your mind is not only connected to your body, y'all. Just so you know, your body is like a temporary shell for mind to live in. And you need to not identify with it, because that's limiting to your power as well. And this is one of the major secrets of theurgy magic and ascension magic, is to understand that your body is not you. Meaning, yeah, your body is yours and you use it, but it's not who or what you are. You are your mind living in your body. And this is simply proved by the fact that you can lose a part of your body and your whole mind will still be whole, because that's what you really are. You won't lose no part of your mind just because, like, say that your arm got chopped off or something. You're not going to lose part of your mind because of that. So that's not who you are. That's not what you are. What you are is your mind. Now, so if you understand that, you'll know that these things that you thought you had to connect to through your body, you don't. You are connected to things through your mind. So the different elements and things like that are just different levels of awareness that you tap into, and the different powers and magic and all that are just the different levels of mind that you are able to tap into when you're no longer limited by thinking that you're a body only. So that's something to look into, to really raise up your power, is to look into ascension magic and theurgy. Now, this is not something for beginners. I should also point out, if you are a beginner, it is good to start off with viewing these things as outside of you, only simply because there are dark things out there, there are negative things out there, and bad things out there that we call demons or evil spirits or whatever. But once again, when you realize that mind and spirit are one and the same, those are just different parts of your mind and of the one mind. Now, this is why it's good, if you're a beginner, to start off viewing them as outside of you, because it's just safer that way. And you don't want to accidentally... these are where the cases of possession and in the negative sense come from. It's when people who don't understand or really have any sense of will over it, or willpower over it, will start to dabble in these things, and they'll end up fucking themselves up, because, and I mean, like, they'll mentally go insane and lose mental control and stuff, because they dabble in these things like theurgy and ascension magic without understanding what it even is, or without understanding it in the right way. So you have to be careful with it if you're a beginner. Do not just immediately go into this with magic and stuff. You need to start off viewing these things as outside of you, and then progressively get into ascension magic. And this is also called evocation and invocation. Evocation is the magic where you're viewing everything that's outside of you, and you're just summoning its presence to you, because at this point you still think you are a body. But invocation is whenever you summon those presences to you, and you begin to take them into yourself and merge with them and commune with them. And that's really where you begin to ascend your mind's consciousness up to the point to where you will begin to realize you're not your body. your mind. Now, this is also a part of the Matrix as well. And the Matrix is designed in a way to where you will constantly only view yourself as a body. It's like a giant binding spell on the human species. It will make you think and be trapped in this mindset that you're an individual body only. And it will kind of suppress you from becoming something more, or from realizing what you really are. And that's really the main reason why they made the Matrix to begin with. Because I don't really want to get too much into that, because that gets into like conspiracy theories and all this stuff, which really I just don't know the truth about. So I'm not going to get all into that. But I'm going to say these things like binding spells and stuff, witches cast those on people because they want to restrict them from something. That's all I'm going to say. So with the Matrix, it's like a giant binding spell. So someone or something set that up to restrict humans from acknowledging and realizing this power within themselves. Now, this is why it's so important to break free of it, because it is like you're under a binding spell. And if you want to gain power and ascend into these different levels of power and stuff, you're going to have to be able to break free of that binding. And so this is why it's very important to free your mind, which we all have the power to break free of it, to free your mind of these things, and reconnect back to nature, to the real reality. And then the power will start to flow into you. So really, I think I'm going to end this video with that, because I don't want to become too much into other topics, because I really wanted to keep these videos about spell work and stuff, but I just had to add this extra bit about power itself and really how to gain it and all this, because I believe that is a very important part of doing spell work effectively. People in the Matrix mindset can still do spells, but it's not going to be as powerful and stuff as when you have more power, of course. So I'm going to end this video here, y'all. But I'll be back in a minute, because I'm still going to do some more videos today about some other topics. So hail to the witches and blessed be.